So my name is Andrew Shikiar. It's great to be at Identiverse. It's great to see Steve. I don't know if he's still here, but I will say, for those of us who were here last year at Identiverse, it wasn't the same without people like Steve being here in person, so it's great to have him back in the broader identity community and have all of us back together talking about all things identity. I've been speaking at Identiverse the past several years about FIDO Alliance and Passwordless. It's super interesting to see how this concept has evolved over the years and really accelerated. I think it's one of those rare technologies where we've actually exceeded expectations with the development and the delivery of this technology to go passwordless. So that's me, Executive Director and CMO at FIDO Alliance. So let's start with some statistics. And frankly, we could spend all day, if not the entire conference, going after slide after slide after slide of statistics that talk about and point to the systematic fault of passwords. Right? All these data points. The common thread is a dependence on knowledge-based credentials. Right? Over 80% of data breaches are caused by passwords. And the fact of the matter is, as we look forward and predict ahead, some bold predictions, a very bold prediction: phishing attacks will continue to succeed. And the fact of the matter is, I could have made this prediction last year and the year before that, and probably next year, and would have a perfect track record. But phishing succeeds because it's cheap, and it's easy to do. It's too cheap, and it's too easy. All right? So attacks are going to happen, but we need to raise the bar. We need to raise the cost to make it harder for the bad guys to get in. And this dependence on knowledge-based credentials is not raising the bar one iota. But of greater concern to me, actually, is a new trend that we're seeing, and something else we're seeing more and more in 2022 and 2023, which is that MFA bypass attacks succeeding. So to be clear, any form of 2FA, even SMS OTP, is better than a password alone. All right, we all know that. It's much better than a password alone. That being said, to a hacker, a remote attacker, an OTP, that passcode is no different than a password. It's a human-readable shared secret that's primed for being intercepted, relayed, stuffed, and used to take over one's account. And so my concern about this is that someone who's not in this room, someone less than know, maybe your boss or someone like that, they see, oh, geez, 2FA is not working, and they are disengaged or disinclined to actually move forward on implementing modern multi-factor authentication. Right? That's the risk that we face. So it's very important for people to understand the difference between what I'll call legacy 2FA and modern multi-factor authentication. And I'll dig into that a little bit more momentarily. But now for some good news. It's not just that there's no more bad news. Some good predictions here. First of all, enterprise passwordless deployments will grow rapidly. It's been really interesting to see the analyst community at large has really embraced passwordless authentication. So this is an image from Gartner. They have multiple reports saying this, IDC, EMA, you name the analyst firm, they're all saying, now is the time to go passwordless. So for those of you who are running enterprise identity management, I'd imagine passwordless is on your radar or being implemented today. So it's been great to see this accelerate so dramatically over the past couple of years. This will be the case moving forward into 2022 and 23 and beyond. Additionally, we talked about something called Passkey last month. And we'll talk more about it today, and it'll be a key topic throughout the week here at Identiverse. But the fact of the matter is, device platforms are now providing consumer-ready solutions at scale that will finally start to turn the tide on the consumer challenge for passwordless authentication. But going back to legacy MFA versus modern MFA, this is something we message on and preach upon at FIDO Alliance, is this fundamental shift that's required from the way we've always done authentication, which is basically legacy knowledge-based credentialing. Right? That's what we need to move away from. Anything in your head is something you need to remember. It can and will be stolen. Again, any human-readable shared secret sent over the wire will be stolen, full stop. Right? We need to move from that approach to a more modern approach of possession-based credentialing. So it's just essentially something in your hand or who you are. Right? So local on-device authentication, you're authenticating to the device, let the device do the work authenticating back to the server. This is FIDO's core asymmetric public key cryptography architecture. You create a unique key pair, and the key pair does the work. And Rachel, and the key thing here also is that it has to be user-initiated and cryptographically secure. So there's some gray areas here. It's not all human-readable shared secrets that are the problem. Like device prompt fatigue is a major issue. Right? Someone's getting device prompts, and finally they say, yes, I allow it to happen. Right? But that's not user-initiated. So modern authentication is user-initiated and cryptographically secure on the device. You know, Rachel's Tobac's presentation today I thought was super interesting, talking about social engineering. And one very important thing she said is, like, let's not victim shame. We should never do that. The fact of the matter is, I personally believe that we are all human beings, obviously, and we have human nature, and human nature is good. We want to trust people. We want to believe people. So if I'm a Twitter admin and someone calls me up and says, hey, it's IT, I need your code, yes, I'll give it to them because I'll believe them, especially when they have the constructs put in place that makes it look believable. So we need to move from passionate decision-making to dispassionate algorithms for user authentication, and that's what we're talking about here with modern FIDO authentication. And of course, that's been FIDO's focus since day one. So we're almost on our 10th year of existence. The object from day one has been to find a method of user authentication that's simpler and stronger than passwords and OTPs. The fact of the matter is, if your form of MFA is too complex, your employees will work around it, and your customers won't use it. There's a long history of very strong technologies that are not being used because they're too hard to use. And more, you know, the simpler part of FIDO authentication is coming to the fore, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second also. But FIDO's approach is using open standards for asymmetric public key cryptography. But fundamentally, our belief is that you shouldn't have to say, let alone know, what asymmetric public key cryptography means to use it. Right? It's a single gesture, single touch. The same thing I do to unlock my device 75 times a day is what I can now do to securely log in to apps and services. So a little bit about FIDO Alliance itself. As you may know, we're an open industry body. We have over 250 members worldwide. Oops, that's not the slide yet. These companies here, this is our board of directors. We have 40-something companies on our board. It's a really great list of companies, but what I think is most important is that it's the right set of companies to be addressing the password problems. We have the companies that are shipping devices at massive scale to billions of users worldwide. We have experts in identity, security, and biometrics. And last but not least, we have the service providers whose businesses need FIDO for their own success. So it's that combination of inputs that really lead to the outputs that FIDO Alliance is delivering in technical specifications, business guidelines, and other best practices to help people be successful with FIDO authentication. Now, in addition to our board, we have sponsor members who build out our working groups, associate members who build out our FIDO certified ecosystem. We liaise with other .orgs, and then we also have a lot of government engagement as members and also through regulatory ongoing engagements that we have on that front. And one thing, you know, all these members have realized is that for FIDO to take on the challenge of passwords, we need to look at the advantages that passwords hold. Our passwords are part of the fabric of the web itself. To take on that fabric, you know, look, what are the core advantages of passwords? One is incumbents. Right? All of us in this room, and all of our kids, and all of our parents have, you know, when you go to a website, you look for the username and password dialog box. That's just a learned behavior. We all know how to use passwords, and you can enter them just about anywhere. It's not fun to enter them on a smart TV or a smartphone, but you can do it. All right? So it's an incumbent behavior, and it's a known behavior, and it's ubiquitous. So for FIDO to have a chance of supplanting passwords, we need to be just as ubiquitous and just as easy to use. And so by working with the W3C and working with our members, we've seen very broad support for FIDO, such that it's now supported in every major web browser through WebAuthn, and also native APIs in every major operating system. To the point now where virtually every device being unboxed this very second, and they're happening like a very rapid clip, has support for FIDO authentication built into it. So the market is now fully addressable, which is very exciting. And it's been that way for a couple of years now, and it continues to grow, and the market's catching up with that. And so it's little wonder then that I showed you the analyst clip before, but it's little wonder then that we're seeing such strong support for passwordless authentication, FIDO authentication. So again, we're seeing more and more positive data points about the percentage of enterprises and consumer-facing applications that are moving towards passwordless authentication to help secure the users and the companies themselves. And we've seen, you know, countless deployments of FIDO authentication. These are just 6 more recent ones that have come to the fore. I mean, literally dozens of companies have deployed FIDO both internally and externally with great success, right? And that's great, and we should feel really good about that, and we do. That being said, our work is far from done. All right, so going back a year for 2021, I was here last year, and in fact, I spoke. That was me. That's a big image of me talking in front of an elephant. And we weren't talking about elephants, but we were talking about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room for FIDO authentication has always been about account recovery. right? We've always had a recovery challenge. Possession-based authentication is great, but what happens when you lose possession of your possession-based authenticator? What do I do? What do I do? We've never had a great answer, to be honest with you. So we've issued some guidance, but a lot of it relies on the relying parties' domain expertise, some tools they may have in the toolbox to help them be successful in re-enrolling their customers or their employees. But ultimately, it defaults to the lowest common denominator, which is what? A password. Right? And so we're still, we're actually taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back by we're teaching people to learn passwordless flows, but the fact that they need to enroll each device by using a password or to recover their device by using a password is really not accomplishing the bigger objective. So we talked last year about account recovery, and we talked about usability. And both these topics are still very much top of mind for FIDO authentication, our members in the ecosystem at large. I would say, in fact, that usability in general, every conversation I have with a company who's interested in deploying FIDO begins and ends with usability, right? Usability is so much at the core of what we do. Again, every conversation I have about FIDO authentication begins and ends with usability. And so when we look at the next steps needed to reach mass adoption, it's that, right? Furthering usability while keeping security in mind. And so I want to share with you some initiatives that we've launched over the past year that are actually putting some wood behind that concept. So a couple things. First of all, last year, we talked about, just checking time, we talked about UX guidelines. We were very excited last year to release the first ever UX guidelines from FIDO Alliance addressing the platform authenticator use case. So basically using Touch ID on a MacBook or Windows Hello on a laptop. This was a first of its kind study for a standards body like FIDO. We actually assembled a group of experts who led an external research firm in a 3-part study, both moderated and unmoderated research, to understand the best way to actually get someone to enroll for on-device biometrics or on-device sign-ins instead of passwords. What's fascinating about the study is that when he broke down the user journey, this was not a technical challenge. This was very much a messaging challenge, a design challenge, going from how do you actually prompt someone to want to use this, to get them to enroll, to the visual cues, to the education, to for the guy who I remember watching the video where we had actually a fake bank site set up. He logged in with his thumb on his MacBook, and he's like, whoa, that's way too easy, right? What happened? So how do you actually explain it to them so they understand that no friction is actually okay? Right, so it's messaging, education, iconography. That's the blend of things you need to do when you think about usability, and that's what FIDO is now looking at across the board. Oops. And then releasing tomorrow is the second version of our UX guidelines. Very excited about this for security keys. Right, so whereas platform authenticators are inherently a mass market consumer use case, this study is focused on the prosumer, so not the enterprise, but kind of the security conscious consumer who opts to buy a security key and use a security key. These are the people we all want to have logging into our systems and services. But the fact of the matter is, for those of you who use security keys, I think you'll agree with me when I say that when you go from site to site, the process is wildly different and not all that smooth. Right? So whether it's enrollment, management, naming a key, whatever it might be, we need that to be more consistent across sites to encourage further adoption and better implementations to harden the security of the internet itself. So tomorrow, there's a session on this led by Kevin Goldman and Judy Clare. I encourage you to go to that Wednesday at 12 o'clock. They'll be talking about the findings from this report. Other things we're doing. We've launched a UX committee. So not to bore you with standards body sausage making, but this is important. We actually have a committee inside of FIDO Alliance, which is comprised of UX and design leads from some of the biggest brands on the planet. All right, so typically, how many of you go to standards meetings? All right, so the people who go to standards meetings. The UX committee is really not like that. All right, these are not people debating specs. These are very professional designers and UX leads who bring a different viewpoint into the challenge that we all face. And again, since every conversation we have about deploying FIDO begins and ends with usability, it's critical to have this viewpoint in FIDO Alliance at our board informing everything that we do. One other new thing we're releasing tomorrow is a white paper on accessibility guidance. So basically, as everyone rightfully places more and more emphasis on diversity and inclusion, it's important to think about users who might not interface with a device that other people do. So this paper gives guidelines on how to optimize your FIDO deployments for users with disabilities. But beyond the UX work and the guidance work, it's actually really important to also build all this functionality directly into FIDO specifications. And that's what Passkey is doing. right? So you've probably heard about Passkey. There's been a lot of buzz about this. We're very excited about it. Fundamentally, what this does is it allows, for the first time, it allows a private key to be synced securely across the device cloud to address some of the problems we've been talking about. Right? We're talking about account recovery and usability. So right now, if I'm a user, average consumer, if I enroll an account, say on my MacBook with bank.com, with my biometric, and then I go to my iPad, and I have to re-enroll that device, it just causes questions for me. Like, why should that user have to enroll twice when if they use iCloud Keychain for passwords, they don't? It should be as seamless to use your biometric as it is to use a password manager. The fundamental advantage here, of course, is that there's no passwords. Right, so even a complex password can and will be phished. This approach is unphishable, user-friendly, on-device authentication. And there's plenty of sessions. I'm not going to go too deep on Passkey today. There's plenty of sessions the rest of the week that I'm going to encourage you to go to momentarily. But fundamentally, what's this mean for you? What's this mean in the marketplace? Let's talk about UX. So it's a better user experience. So it's consistent across all the user's devices. It's familiar, simple actions, fingerprint-based PIN. Again, it's the same action everyone takes 75 times a day to unlock their device is now what they could take to log in. And the nice thing is, again, you only have to enroll once. And the added benefit of that is a security benefit. All right, so not only is it more usable and more scalable for your users, because more people actually want to use biometric authentication, it's far more secure. So it brings all the inherent benefits of FIDO authentication to scale, to masses. But the last bullet here, I think, is absolutely critical, which is that it allows RPs to eliminate passwords. Right, so before I was talking about 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, that's what we've been doing. Right, so look, there's massive behavioral change that needs to be learned to again, take on the incumbents and the advantage that passwords hold. So that behavioral change is happening by passwordless login flows. But the fact that people have to, again, keep on re-enrolling each device is both a usability challenge, but also a security challenge. Those statistics we showed on the third slide, or the first slide, all the statistics, they all come down to passwords. Passwords are a liability for an organization to have to manage. Right? This sheds them of that obligation, that sheds them of that liability. It takes passwords out of play. I can't emphasize enough how important that is, because that will start finally actually turning the tide on the statistics that we showed earlier on. And eventually, you won't be able to stand up here and make a prediction that phishing is going to continue to grow, because without credentials, it'll be harder to, without knowledge-based credentials, it'll be harder to execute a phishing attack and other remote attacks. So perhaps most significant about all this work about Passkey is that it's being done in FIDO Alliance in conjunction with the 3 largest platform providers on the planet. Right, so it was not easy to arrange a press announcement between FIDO Alliance, Apple, Google, and Microsoft. Trust me, but that level of coordination and commitment shown through, right? There's a deep level of commitment to do this together, to understand this is an industry benefit, something by the industry for the industry. At the end of the day, replacing passwords is an industry-wide mission, an industry-wide challenge. It needs an industry-wide solution, and that's what these companies are helping FIDO Alliance deliver, along with all of our other members. So 2 weeks ago, Apple at WWDC announced their intent to ship Passkey in the next versions of iOS and macOS. We anticipate Google and Microsoft following suit in their upcoming releases of their platforms and operating systems over the next, say, 6 to 12 months. So as we get to the end of 2023 into 2024, we'll have very broad, pervasive support of this technology implemented in literally all the major operating systems. So I started with some predictions. I'm going to end with some crystal ball predictions on Passkey as well. All right, so there's been a lot of talk about this. I know there's a desire for more information. We're working as a community to get more information out there to everybody. These are my perspectives. All right, so a couple of things about Passkey. First of all, this won't happen overnight. All right, this is not like lives are not going to change tomorrow. They will change eventually, but not overnight. And I think that's very important to remember that this will take some time. All right, so even the Apple release won't happen until this fall. Again, Google and Microsoft will follow after that, so it'll take some time for this technology to get out there in market, supported by service providers, and so Passwordless has always been a marathon, not a sprint. I think this helps us gives us a little bit of a cheat code, and it advances us on that marathon. But we're not going to be there overnight. Secondly, Passkey won't be utilized in all industries and all use cases. Right, so I've heard from people in regulated industry, maybe outside the US, where there's some concerns around this. They might not want to use Passkey right away. Totally understandable, and I think that's going to take some time for all industries to evolve towards this direction. Lastly, passkeys will not replace hardware security keys for many scenarios. So I want to be crystal clear on this. The gold standard from a security standpoint for FIDO authentication remains a FIDO security key. All right, so passkeys will not replace security keys for many scenarios. We run a very advanced certification program so we could have higher levels of certification for different types of hardware authenticators. That will continue to thrive and grow as we address those use cases. But Passkey absolutely will help mass market applications. Passkey does stand to take passwords out of the hands of hundreds of millions of consumers quite quickly. Right? So it won't happen overnight, but I'd say as we get into 2023 and onwards, you'll see huge applications using Passkey instead of passwords. That's hugely important. And as such, it will start to turn the tide against credential-led attacks. And lastly, while not every enterprise will embrace Passkey, if you look at the latest statistics from Microsoft, I think it's around 25% of companies right now implement MFA. And so if you're comfortable with BYOD, or maybe you're like in a retail environment, you want to have your cashiers use their devices to log in, this is going to be an excellent solution to help jumpstart MFA in those scenarios. But I think the key message here that I'm trying to say is, first of all, yes, Passkey stands to dramatically change things for the better in the marketplace, but also it does need to iterate. Right? So the first state of Passkey, right, what we see coming out from Apple this fall and eventually from Google and Microsoft, will not be the end state. Right? There's feedback coming into FIDO Alliance, into the stakeholders through W3C. That feedback's going to be incorporated in the specs. Like any technology, it needs to evolve, it needs to improve, and it will do. But we have an excellent foundation that we can all build upon to move passwordless in the immediate future. So with that, I'm just about out of time. Some considerations as you look at deploying FIDO. I guess my key message here is that really FIDO can scale up and down according to your needs. Right? So Passkey is one other way of implementing FIDO. So whether you're a small shop, maybe you have 50 lawyers in a law firm, you need to protect with FIDO security keys, or you're a multinational e-commerce company, you want everyone to use biometric authentication for logins, the FIDO specs can meet that journey. And we see many companies starting their journey with a native app for passwordless and going to the web. Likewise, we see people now looking at, well, how do I go from there to Passkey? The specs scale. They all bring the same benefits of unphishable, asymmetric public key cryptography, and they're privacy preserving. They're very robust. So I think that as you look at embarking upon your own passwordless authentication journeys, please do take a good hard look at the FIDO specs and the rich FIDO certified ecosystem of products and services that support these specifications. So if you want to learn more, we have a booth. I'll be there along with our team, and there's 2 sessions on Passkey. So later on today, Tim Capelli and Scott Bingham are doing High FIDO, Meet Passkey. Clever. 25-minute session later on today. And then a deeper dive with David Turner and Tim Capelli on Thursday, and Christian Brand on Thursday, doing a deep dive on passkeys on Thursday morning. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much. I don't think we have time for questions, but please grab me at the booth or grab me outside. Happy to take any questions you have. Thank you.